Welcome back to
Like literarily.
Wow, we can just replace our actual music intro and just use Rylee.
I'm so talented. I'm so musically inclined.
Literarily.
It's about the fact that episode 10 is all about the idea of you, which recently just became a movie with, as you all know, the second love of my life, Nicholas Gallatin,
Woo!
woo, who's currently on my shirt, even though none of you can see it.
She's rocking the August Moon fan merch.
So I am Alexis, better known as Momo or Momo's Bookshelf.
I'm Riley from Riley Tries Hobbies.
And I am Alicia.
All right, so before we jump in to the idea of you, I have a conceptual question for you both, and I had just posed this to Riley on Instagram Reels. I have seen some debate around this book, and then just from a reel today, that in order for a book to be a romance book, it must have a central couple and it must have a happily ever after. Must a romance book have a happily ever after?
Yes, but no. I don't. Oh, that's a good question. So I feel like if it's a standalone one, more than likely, yes. But happily ever after is subjective, right? Like, what if the couple was happier apart and you, as the audience and the reader, knows that? But then at the same time, like in your cliche world, happily ever after could mean that they work through their problem and they end up back together.
But it's
So
not a romance. Yeah, I think I'm generally like it can be about the snapshot of time where there was a romance. Riley, how about you?
I do agree there has to be like a central couple or like maybe a love triangle, but I don't think you need like a happy ending for it to still be romance. I don't know. I feel like that's silly.
All right, so we're all give or take like on the same page.
Let's get into the description of this book. Keep in mind, I did not write this description. I pulled it directly from the Storygraph, aka my favorite app. Although this isn't sponsored, I just really love the Storygraph app. Please go on and add me as a friend. I want to see what you're reading. Anywho, so Selene Marchand, the 39-year-old owner of an art gallery in Los Angeles, is reluctant to take her daughter, Isabel, to meet her favorite boy band. But since her divorce, she's more eager than ever to be close to Isabel. The last thing Selene expects to make a connection with is one of the members of the world famous boy band, August Moon. But Hayes Campbell is clever, confident, and posh, and the attraction is immediate. That he's over 20 years younger than her complicates things a bit, though. What begins as a series of secret rendezvous quickly evolves into a passionate and genuine relationship. It is a journey that spans continents as Selene and Hayes navigate each other's worlds, from stadium tours to international art fairs to secluded hideaways in Paris and Miami. For Selene, it is a reclaiming of self, as well as a rediscovery of happiness and love. When Selene and Hayes' romance becomes a viral sensation, and both she and her daughter become the target of rabid fans and an insatiable media, Selene now faces as how her romantic life has impacted the lives of those she cares about most.
I gotta say that I love that you accidentally just quoted a One Direction song in that summary with the secret little
So
booth.
accidental.
you're welcome. You're welcome.
The short version of this summary, though, is that a 39, 40-year-old woman falls for a 20-year-old man in a famous boy band and talks about how she loves him, but the age gap is really hard on her and her daughter. And she does this for 384 pages or 11 hours and 55 minutes. And then, spoiler alert, they break up.
That was real. That was real.
Well, if that doesn't make you want to read a book, I don't know what does.
sorry. I was really passionate about how I felt about this book, obviously. As you can tell, I don't think very highly of it. So sorry, guys.
Yeah, it was a little meh for me.
Yeah, I didn't hate it or dislike it as much as my lovely co-host here. But I mean, mostly what I just gathered from it was that like she just got married and had a kid young and just like couldn't be reckless. And then Hayes was just kind of like that rebel phase. And then the book was literally just you getting walked through her mom guilt. So
I mean, I don't even know if I really felt like the mom guilt was there. Like,
Yeah, overall, the vibes of this book was that Selene is, in fact, a girl boss. I will give her that. But she thinks very, very highly of herself and wants to do her and not care about the consequences. But she has a young daughter, so she kind of has to worry about the consequences. Yeah, that those are the vibes that I got from the book. It also tends to be very cyclical. It goes from periods of doubt to happiness to guilt over and over again. Selene is constantly trying to take control of her life and live it the way that she wants to live, but the guilt she feels keeps getting in the way. Meanwhile, Hayes is pretty all in on Selene from the beginning. He does kind of love Bomber, but he is also constantly worried about her and her daughter, which, while getting kind of like strung along by Selene, who has trouble giving him a straight answer on how she feels, because it's like constantly changing. So I don't know. Those were the vibes that I got.
and I think it's important to point out that this book is supposed to be like Celine's perspective. Celine is having this like revitalization, this reckless period, as Alexis put it. Like it is very much supposed to be like her tension with exploring that, but it does, particularly for the book, the age gap is 20 years. Like Hayes is maybe in his late 19s, definitely in his 20s by the time the book's like really rolling. Like Celine is turning 40 in this book. Like it is a 20-year age gap. This dude is like 6, 7 years older than her child, and we don't really get any exploration of like Hayes's feelings being validated. They feel quite invalidated a number of times by Celine. And then it's her, just like Rylee was saying, constantly questioning, like, why am I in this relationship? But like, there's no reflection on that felt deep anyway about the age gap. It was more of her just freaking out that there was an age gap than like, would this work with an age gap?
And we'll get into it a little bit later with the actual movie comparison, but also like the fact that in the book, one of the daughter's favorite August Moon members was Hayes, and she felt like she would be like wrecking this image, I guess, for her daughter too. That the message was a little refreshing in the sense of like falling for someone and like who they are and not the idea of them. And then, spoiler alert, like Rylee said, they still broke up and it wasn't necessarily for the worst, it was for the best. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on the book vibes.
So I listened to the audiobook. Celine and Selene are the same person. So just keep that in mind going forward, is that the audiobook pronounces it as Selene Marchand, and just reading it, I would have pronounced it Celine too. So.
All right, so getting down a rabbit hole. So, full disclaimer, this is going to be a tangent, and it is once again a tangent related to the musical world, but this time not Taylor Swift. But if you would have caught me in my prime between 2010 and 2016, I was quite the expert on One Direction, and that is the musical artist we're going to be focusing on now.
Being her roommate from 2013 to 2017, I can confirm that Alicia was a One Directioner for sure.
So, this was not a fanfic, but this book is 100% a fanfic. And that is the hill I am going to die on for this book. The author claims that this book is not a One Direction fanfic. This book was published in the summer of 2017. And from what I found online with interviews of the author, she had been working on a autobiographical story, a semi-autobiography of her life and a relationship she had experienced with a significant age gap. And she had been working on that off and on until she started this book. And part of what inspired this book was supposedly multiple people, such as Prince Harry, such as Harry Styles. So Harry Styles is one of the boy band members of the boy band One Direction that was very, very popular between 2010 and 2017, which this book came out again in 2017. So like the timelines are lining up there. She describes the main character, Hayes, exactly like Harry Styles. Like word for word, she is just describing Harry Styles. And the conclusion I think the truth that I'm going to believe is what happened is I think she was working on a book about her own experiences struggling with this age gap relationship. I think she was trying to figure out a way to tell the story and make it maybe a little bit more fiction-like. And I think she may have latched a little too strongly onto One Direction as a narrative piece to fictionalize her own experience, because this book reads so much like it is a One Directioner's mom's fanfic of getting with Harry Styles that it's almost cringe. I found it very hard to get through the book without thinking of One Direction similarities. Watching the movie felt even a little more awkward because of that. But just to like highlight some of the weird coincidences, that this was supposedly, not a One Direction fanfic. Like I said, Hayes, Harry, first of all, didn't really change the name very much there. But they're both members of a boy band from the UK. Hayes is described literally, again, exactly like Harry Styles, down to the eye color, the dimples, the curly hair. Even things that were like weird tropes in the One Direction fandom were like things she ended up using to characterize Hayes. It's like she had to go deep in this rabbit hole and then still use the same characteristics for comparison. So it's really hard to miss. But then also just use the same number of band members. So there's 5 members of both bands. There's a Liam in One Direction. There's also literally a Liam in this boy band in the book. His name was changed to Adrian for the movie, probably to try to avoid some of the One Direction rumors. Zayn is clearly represented by Rory in the book. This is like the rebel of the group, had a very similar vibe. And then there is Louis, and Louis's representation in the book is a character named Oliver. Additionally, Oliver and Hayes are marketed as being like the best friends of the group, which was something that was very common for Harry and Louis in One Direction. But there was also a lot of gay rumors that had surrounded the two of them. And those same rumors show up in this book between Oliver and Hayes, which is just like, okay, how deep into the lore were you? I think like the biggest stretch would be saying that Simon is supposed to be representing Niall, which is a disgrace to Niall. He and Harry were my favorite back in the day. And so I wish he had. I mean, if you're gonna already copy the boy band, don't get rid of Niall. Don't overlook him. That's offensive. I don't know. Like if you're gonna copy that much, just go all in. This I felt like was a fanfic, even though it wasn't a fanfic, which makes it really weird because like it feels like it's a walking flag for why fanfics should stay in the fanfic universe, even though it's not a fanfic. So that's all just very confusing.
Yeah, I was not one of those people who grew up like reading Wattpad and whatnot. I was not a fan fiction girly. I like can't comment on if it actually reads like a fanfic. but if I was gonna imagine what a fanfic reads like, it's this. This is what it is for me, in my brain, at least.
Yeah, I didn't read a ton of fan fiction growing up, but I read enough to know that, like, I agree, it definitely runs 100% like fan fiction. I am definitely, like, even if the author, Robin Lee of The Idea of You, is not completely, like, saying or willing to admit that this was, Harry Styles fan fiction. Like, girl, you were at least influenced. Were you listening to the One Direction album while you were writing this fan fiction on Wattpad? Like, and it's okay if you were.
I have a lot of icks from this book.
All right, let's hear the icks.
Okay, let me grab my note on my phone. Alrighty, I'm not going to go through all of these, but again, I did listen to this book, and Robin Lee, the author of the book, is the one who narrates it, and she's very breathy and is very much trying to be sultry, and it's icky. So that's the first ick off the bat when you start listening to it. Second, Selene is like pronounced Selene, so that's also awful. And Marchand, like, also awful. 3 icks right off the bat, right when you start the book. And then she is very much like pretentious in the book. She talks about being French every single chapter about being French. I don't care that you're French. I don't care. Like, in the movie, at least they don't do that, but in the book, they just talk about being French all the time, how being French is so much better than being anybody else. Like, I'm gonna gag myself with a spoon if I have to listen to you talk about being French again. Her daughter has a crush on a 17-year-old boy, and she's saying that that's not okay, and then she's also saying that her relationship with a 20-year-old is okay, and that's also icky. Also, another ick is that it was until 60% into the book that they got caught by the paparazzi. Meanwhile, they had been going to Nobu and other public places all before this without being caught and making out and getting each other off in public places, and didn't get caught by the paparazzi? This doesn't make any sense to me. Ick. Don't think he's referring to him as a rock star boyfriend? Ick. She also compares Hayes at one point to Obama. Ick. Ick. You unfold me. Ick. Direct quote. Anyway, I think I should be done because I'm going to go too long on this if I say every ick. But
I
yeah,
think
those are my icks.
we found Rylee's dissertation.
This is my dissertation about how icky Selene Marchand is, and Robin Lee as the narrator. Robin Lee, never narrate another book ever again. So bad.
No,
I'm done.
I agree so much. That narration was tough. Like, I'm newer to the audiobook world, but that was that was tough. I was literally trying to listen to it, and mind you, I like decently enjoyed this book. That experience took away a star. Like, audiobook, 3 stars. Like, it was not good. I really just, now I know why they have voice actors. 100%. Well, speaking of actors and voice actors and intimacy coordinators and all the things that go into a production, this is a book to movie comparison episode. So to get into the nitty-gritty, basically I just wanted to provide a second spoiler alert, as the book has been out since 2017 and the movie came out 2 days ago. So if you would like to experience spoiler-free content and had read the book but haven't seen the movie, go watch the movie and come back and tune back into the episode. If you don't mind the spoilers, keep listening. So the movie opens up to Solene's 16-year-old daughter, soon to be 17 and a senior, rushing out the door with her 2 friends. One is still Georgia, like in the book, and the other is not another teenage girl. It is a guy. So that's one minor change to note. Heading out to Coachella, which is also different from the book. And when she gets to Coachella with her daughter and her friends, she ends up in the VIP lounge, kind of just hanging out by herself. She realizes she wants to go to the bathroom. Bam, it's actually Hayes Campbell's trailer. So he ends up finding her at the art gallery where he then proceeds to buy out the entire gallery. And when he realizes that he wants more, he asks her to go on the European segment of his tour while Izzy is at a summer camp. And they go to France and they end up breaking up in this huge scene where Ollie and the group basically joke about how the song Closer from the movie is used to get girls after they meet somebody, and they sing it at concerts as like an impressive or as like a what's the word I'm thinking of, like an impress factor, I guess. And essentially she kind of like realizes in the dynamic, and I think the movie did a great job of this, kind of just the age difference and life difference of where she's at versus Hayes and his friends. So they break up. She basically shuts down and is like WTF, and she says that I think she's just like in love with the idea of him. And they end up getting caught in the Europe tour, and that's where they go viral post the breakup in France. And when Celine goes to pick up Izzy from the camp, that's when she learns that Izzy now knows. They actually handle it really well. I'm assuming that's just because of like the age up factor in the movie compared to the book. And then she tells her to go be with Hayes. Then basically she tells him like, hey, we can't be together. They essentially make like this plan to meet again once he's like lived more life. She doesn't really anticipate that happening. And then bam, 5 years later, we get a scene where Hayes goes solo and he says he's taking a break. He's going to take this break in LA. He has somebody to see there and he shows up at the gallery. Bam, there's the end of the movie. So I know that was a lot, but there are more major differences to note. Um, I'll just start with like the fastest and quickest one, which is the fact that the ages were different. You know, they aged up Izzy, they aged up Hayes to 24. Um,
That's like a general thing I think I took away from the difference between the book and the movie. It's like I think they definitely made Celine more digestible. Like they narrowed the age gap. She's not constantly flaunting that she is French. Like they made her a little more likable, I guess you could say. She's
you know,
not
one
stealing her daughter's like dream celebrity crush.
they definitely Americanized her a little bit for the movie, which isn't a bad thing, and it made it, still entertaining. But I think in the book, them both being European was kind of like a bonding point.
I don't know. I think it was the right move for the movie to make her less pretentious because I don't know. I would never be able to watch the movie again if she was the same Selene that was in the book, but that's just my opinion. I honestly didn't think highly, so I shouldn't talk too much. I also do think them aging Hayes up to 24 instead of like 1920 was definitely a good move, just because like I don't know, I found it much more palatable for like this guy to be in a serious relationship with like an older woman when he can drink alcohol and do his own taxes. And
Which I think, again, I didn't rabbit hole too much down the like large fan groups for this book, but it seems like what they latched on to was how strong of a character Celine is in a book and like this I don't give a type attitude. And like, I mean, that's certainly played down. So like, I guess we interpreted that as more pretentiousness, as we've been saying, but like some people saw this very much as like somebody sticking it to.
I also just feel like instead of like I don't know, they downplayed definitely her like career. They could have made her less. I don't know, like in the book she was obviously super pretentious, but in the movie she like wasn't. It was super laid back and whatnot. They could have just made her like a like badass working woman. Like
And kind of leading not necessarily into her character and stuff, but more so into her situation. What do you guys feel about what they did with Daniel's character and their storyline of how they got together and how they got divorced?
oh, that actually really annoyed me because I feel like part of like the thing that made Selene actually likable in the book was that she knew that she wasn't in love with him anymore and that it like wasn't going to work out with them, and they like divorced each other because he like didn't support her like goals and whatnot like that. So like they ended like not necessarily like super amicably, but like they ended on their own terms and they were both happy with the situation. Meanwhile, in the movie, like he cheated on her and they really villainized Daniel, and it seemed like she was like the victim in the situation. In the book, that's not like the vibes that I got. So that I don't know. I think that definitely took away from her character.
Well, I think it was done as part of that, like trying to make her character more likable because you can knock it off as, oh, she's getting in this relationship with this young guy. It's like an act of rebellion. She's been hurt, and it's not so much like her owning it and like refinding herself as it's more framed in the book.
That's
Oh,
fair.
yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kind of keep the conversation going, what do we think about the like book to cinematic vibe? So obviously in the book you tend to pick up more of like that internal monologue if the book is from a first person perspective. And in the movie, sometimes they have to shorten certain plot lines, they have to add these other things. And for this one, because it is a boy band, they had to add music. What do we kind of think when it comes to the vibes from, taking it from book to live production?
I mean, as far as the music goes, it was just very clearly a Prime production. Netflix does the same thing. Where like it's like they're trying to launch people's music careers. They just put in way too much music. Like Emily in Paris, I do not need all of those scenes of that chick singing. They did the same thing in Purple Hearts with Nicholas Galitzine, where like they kept letting the leading lady like sing full songs. I'm like, I don't need these entire songs in the movie. And I think the only thing that saved how many songs they put in this movie was how long this movie was. But like this movie was too long.
I concur. This is a very long rom-com. It was a full 2 hours long. And I think if we cut it back to like just like one full song, like the concert scene where it like, makes sense to have them sing a bit, it probably would have been more like a 90-minute rom-com, which is much more palatable. The music wasn't bad necessarily. The music was better than usual. The production was also better than usual for the movie. Like the acting was much better, but I think it was like too much music. I agree with Alicia.
We had Anne Hathaway and Nicholas Galitzine, and I know we've got somebody who can definitely tell us how did Nicholas Galitzine do in this role?
I'm biased. He did phenomenal, and the music was good. I've been listening to this album like nonstop. It's a problem. Me and my mom have been jamming. And I mean, honestly, Nicholas Galitzine played Hayes really well. Anne Hathaway was probably one of the best people they could have picked. She did phenomenal as well. Which leads us to kind of the other larger change to the movie that was not from the book and kind of ties into the beginning of the episode with Alicia's question that kind of launched us. There was the time jump at the end of the movie. We went from, current to 5 years in the future.
I was not expecting the ending change.
Yeah, I was not either. I was really confused when that happened.
I was definitely cracking up at like the wispy goatee they put on Nicholas Galitzine. I was like, what is this?
It was also an ick. I forgot to add that on my list, but it's an ick.
Agreed.
But I felt like I would have preferred them not getting back together.
Agreed.
I feel like because it was a rom-com and, Prime needs streams, so they need it to have like rewatchability. I understand why they made a happy ending. For the movie, it being a movie, I liked it better. For the book, I was glad they broke up because that was insufferable. But for the movie, I understand why they did it, and I don't disagree with it.
I was extremely let down, honestly, in the downplay of how they broke up. I just think as a whole overall with the book and the movie, it was really emphasized by Hayes that he really liked Solin and eventually fell in love with her simply because she saw him as Hayes and not as Hayes Campbell, and that people typically pursued him for this idea of him and the fact that he was this pop star and not who he actually was. And in the book, she really couldn't get him towards the end, especially after like Izzy was getting bullied at school and all that kind of stuff, to get him to stop trying to make like really life altering decisions to kind of fit into where she was in life. Because again, in the book, it was 20 and 40. So she ends up saying that they can't be together because she realized that she was in love with the idea of him, i.e., the book title. And that honestly broke me because I've been broken up with like that before. This person literally told me, oh, we weren't in love with the idea of each other, or we weren't in love with each other. We were only in love with the idea of each other. And that feels like a dagger to your soul. Because you're like, what? You really just liked me for what you thought about me and not who I actually was in front of you? Like, that's such a heartbreaking thing to feel. And I was like, oh my gosh. And so when she like casually dropped it in the movie and then like moved on in the conversation, I was like, oh, you mean the entirety of where this book title came from? So I was really upset when that happened. Everything else that was made, like all the decisions that were made for cinematic purposes, made sense. I will probably watch it again. Nicholas Galitzine is in it. The entire album was Nicholas Galitzine singing.
I enjoyed the movie more than I enjoyed the book. But like I didn't feel the same like whirlwindness and like completely swept up.
Yeah, like she went on that whole European tour with him, and you got like the, sex montage or whatever, and it just like didn't really land, which is crazy because they removed that whole like subplot line with like some of his friends and all that kind of stuff. So they had literally nothing but time to focus on their love story, and it just didn't land the same.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah.
some of those subplot lines were much better removed, which is part of the reason why I still like the movie more.
Yeah, they were tough. We'll let Rylee get into that.
So was when she was the object of affection for him, Oliver, and Hayes' dad, who was still married to Hayes' mom. Worst one. Thank God they cut that.
Absolutely wild.
Well, with that, do we want to talk about overall how we felt? I mean, we've talked about it a lot, but a summary of how we felt about the book versus the movie in general. Alicia, do you want to start us off?
Yes. So I think I mean I kind of just jumped the gun, but I wasn't huge about the book. I thought it would translate better into a movie, and the movie just didn't quite land for me either, to be honest. A lot of the high tension, like I was just saying, the whirlwindness of it all just didn't land. I wasn't as convinced. Um, I enjoyed watching it once.
Yeah, I feel similarly. Like the book, it sounds like from what I'm talking that the book was absolutely awful, but it really wasn't. It was like below average for me, but I was able to like get through it. Like it was fine. There was parts that I like wanted to know what was going to happen, and then it was like a little anticlimactic. But overall, the book wasn't awful. It was slightly below average just because I would never tell anybody to read it. The movie I liked a lot better. I think they made a lot of smart decisions for what they changed in the plot for the movie. It was fun. It was enjoyable. The music, again, like Alexa said, was good music. It was like a little much for the movie, but like the music was fine. Pretty good. Don't read the audiobook. Definitely don't do that. Overall, the book for me was a 2.75 out of 5. So for me, the average is 3. It was slightly below average just because I don't want to recommend it. And the movie was like a solid rom-com. I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to watch it again, but I wouldn't be mad if I had to. What about you, Alexis? Tell us your thoughts.
So the book for me was a 4 out of 5. The audiobook for me was definitely between like a 2 to a 3 out of 5. It was tough. And honestly, the movie for me was also a 4 out of 5. I enjoyed both, and honestly, we'll probably only watch the movie again because y'all know that I'm getting my PhD in Nicholas Galitzine. I'm biased. Who knows? Maybe like 3, 4, 5 episodes from now, I'll be like, yeah, guys, I've been watching the hell out of that movie because Nicholas Gaucy looked amazing in it.
Definitely not a red, white, and royal blue. Okay. To
And that's our
close things
segue.
up,
We're talking about red, white, and royal blue again next month. No, I'm just kidding.
we are to talk about a different book by Casey McCliskey, One Last Stop.
I am very excited. I will need to refresh because it's been a minute since I've read this book, but I'm excited.
I am too. And that is the end of episode 10.
Have a great rest of your day. And thanks for listening to Like Literarily. Bye. Bye, friends.
Bye.
Don't be surprised when you see it in my Spotify top 5 this year. So